All right, I'm going to show you the single welt. You have a pattern piece available for you like this. The single welt, you'll notice, has just lines down here at the bottom. You also have a pattern piece that looks almost identical to this for the double welt that has a whole bunch more lines. So single welt looks more simple. So cut this out and just mark the box. Mark the box. Let me back my camera out. Mark the box that has the little Y's in it, and you're marking that on the wrong side of the fabric. The other thing you've got for this particular thing, and you don't have a pattern piece available for this, you just have the measurements. So this is a piece that measures 8 by 8, and I have simply found the middle line in here, and I have centered 5 inches. So it's 5 inches from this to this. So just go ahead and mark a center line that's 5 inches long in the middle of your pattern, your fabric. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this, it happens to be 5 inches from here to here, and you're gonna, this center line right here is gonna match up with the center line that you marked on your pattern piece. Just go ahead and pin that down. What we're going to do is do some sewing before we get to slice this whole thing open. So what I'm going to do is I am going to sew all the way around the box. Now you might be tempted to start sewing at a corner. Don't. Start sewing midway through one of these edges, and you're sewing around the outside of the box, not that center line. That's where we're going to cut. So around the outside of the entire box, and we're going to use 2.5 on the machine stitch length from about 1/2 inch away down to here, and then about 1/2 inch away from the corners we're going to switch it to 1.5. We're going to go 1.5 around the corners, switch it to 2.5, go back, switch it to 1.5, go around the corners, and back stitch. And then we'll be done with it. And I'm actually going to switch my foot from a zipper foot back to the just my regular foot. This requires a lot of precision, so don't rush it. Be precise. Remember to change your stitch setting. Put the needle down at the corner before you lift the foot and pivot it. Changed my stitch length. Changed my stitch length. And finished it out. Now I'm going to cut this open and do some pressing on it, but I'll do all of that over at the iron. For the single welt, I'm ready to iron it, and first I need to cut it open. I'm just going to cut right down the middle of my welt. Be very careful that you're precise on this. You've got to be precise. Take your time. These numbers that I'm giving you, like 1/4 inch here, all those kinds of things, they might vary from method to method, but the key thing is that if you are given a measurement, you would darn well better be able to measure it perfectly. None of this, oh, I'll just stick it in the machine and just ship it through really fast. No, you've got to be precise. Okay, once it is cut open, you can see it's cut open, and I've cut all the way to those corners. If I don't cut all the way to the corner, it just won't look very crisp, and it will actually make some interesting puckers on the surface of the fabric. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to press all of these edges in. You'll notice when you do the double welt that they're very similar. This and the double welt are very similar. So I might actually do this and the double welt at the same time. This is the one spot that it's majorly different, other than the placement at the very beginning. So once I have pressed all sides, you're going to take this pocket bag right here. You're going to take all of it and shove it through the hole. That you've cut open. And it's all going to go to the wrong side of the garment. And what we will be left with is a hole like that. So now we can look at the back side of the fabric. And what we're going to do is we're going to come in and this edge we're going to press and make sure that those four corners are crisp and beautiful. Notice I'm not pressing up here and down here yet. I'll do that next. Because first what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this 1/2 inch section, and I'll see this 1/4 inch section of our seam allowance that I cut from the opening. That when I was cutting the hole open, that's what these are from. And then after I've pressed it open, I'm going to press it up again, and I'm going to press all the way along so that just a teeny tiny bit of the outside fabric kind of comes and pokes up, so that if we look at it from the front side, we don't see any of the pocket fabric poking up. Now I'm going to grab this portion, bring it up until I can see my seam allowances, and I'm going to press those open as well. And then I'm going to fold it back, but I'm not going to fold it back all the way. I'm only going to fold it back so far so that it covers up the hole. You can see the little hole peeking through right there. I've let my fold happen so that it covers up the hole. So that when I go to the right side, it fills in the entire window. This is your welt. You've only got one of them, so that's why this is called a single welt. On the double welt, you'll have 2 of these filling up the hole. One from the bottom and one from the top. At this point, we can go back and finish sewing. Now to finish sewing the single welt, so this is what it looks like from the front after we've finished pressing. I want to keep this exactly where it is. So if you want to pin from the front, just go ahead and within the welt itself, just give a little pin. And I'm going this way so that I can keep it out of the way of wherever I'm happening to sew. Let's stick it up fairly high. Then what I'm going to do is with it like this, I'm going to take the front of my garment right here. I'm going to fold it back, and I can see my seam allowance and a row of stitching. I'm going to need to sew that, but I'm also, if you take that down and you look over at this little side, when you open that back, you're going to see a little triangle. And we need to sew from the top of that little triangle down to the bottom. Well, we can take care of this side triangle and sewing the bottom and sewing the other side triangle all in one go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave one side open. I'm going to stick it over here, and I'm going to go from the top, and I'm just going to stitch right on top of my other row of stitching. all the way down until you get to the bottom. And as soon as you hit the bottom, leave the needle down. I'm going to lift the foot and I'm going to rotate it. And then as I close the side, I'm going to let the bottom come up and I'll be able to see the bottom row of stitching that I needed to sew along. So then I'm going to sew along the bottom all the way across. And when I get to the other side, right when the stitch ends, I'm going to leave the needle down, turn it, lower the bottom so that I can see the welt again, and open up the other side so I can see the other little triangle. And then I'm going to sew up the other side, make sure I backstitch there. And now the sides are going to be held in place and the bottom is going to be held in place. So that the welt is held perfectly like this and it's not going to flap around. So you've got to remember to do this bottom part. Make sure that that's just a nice, beautiful welt. Now I can open it up and I can still see through, so I need to figure out a way to hide that. And that's where this bottom part comes up. So if this were a waistband up here, for example, I can bring the bottom up and it's going to form my pocket bag down here. But it's also, from the front, going to make it so that I can't see through to skin. So once that's folded all the way up, and it's going to be matching up at the sides, on both sides, and it's just going to be creating a fold up like that. So now what I need to do, and I can do all of this in one long stitch too, I'm going to start at the bottom of this pocket bag on this side, and I need to get it so that this, I can't stick my fingers all the way up in there. So to do this, I've got it all lined up where I want it. I'm going to open up that side, and I'm going to start sewing, and my seam allowance is 1/2 inch, so I'm going to start sewing at 1/2 inch. I'm going to start sewing up basically right over the other stitch that I did with a triangle. And when I get to the top, I'll leave the needle down, pivot, and open up the top. One note, if you want top stitching around the edge of your welt up here, you would need to do that before the step that I'm currently doing. But this is a nice way of getting it so that you don't ever actually have to have top stitching if you don't want it. As you do this, make sure that you don't accidentally sew the welt to it. The other thing that you want to make sure as you're doing this is that you don't pull it up out of the way so that you have a big gap at the top of the welt. So it's like this all needs to happen right next to the top of the welt, but it also can't catch the top of the welt. When I get to the other side, I'll leave the needle down, pivot, open it up, and sew down the other side. Now, if I was doing a welt that wasn't a lined welt, I wouldn't need to finish this edge. But if you're doing like a pair of pants or something, you could come back and serge this edge. And serge this edge as well. And you could sew along this top edge. And it will enclose, well, like a waistband would sew along that top edge. But it'll enclose everything underneath, so all you see on the back is that. But I can't stick my fingers up through here, but I have a little pocket bag and I have a single welt, and that is how you sew a single welt pocket.